Greetings, lovely people. Welcome back to the Beyond Fluency podcast. Today we have part two of our interview with Valerio Lysander. We're talking about all of the beautiful things that you can do with your voice. We're talking about phonetics, prosody, timbre,
and how we can use our voice to shape and understand some of the difficulties we may face in language, as well as a bit of how important our body language is in harnessing the right type of voice. So, let's
Yes.
get into it. How would you describe the sound of English compared to the sound of French, compared to the sound of Spanish, compared to the sound of Chinese? I'm not going to ask about Italian because I don't think you can really have a to have a sense of the sound of the language, you have to be sort of like an outsider of the language, I feel. I think
Yeah.
it's very difficult. I often ask people, what does English sound like to you? Because obviously I'm not native, but being bilingual and having spoken the language from the time at, I don't know, from my first memory,
Mm,
I don't really have a clear idea of what it sounds like, the sound of
mm.
the language. So yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. What would you say the sound of those?
I guess like in English, like this is something like that goes back when I was younger. It all sounded like Asian rather than Asian, and then this is maybe because I it was more like American English. I don't know that there's an American English impression that comes to mind, but yeah, I don't know if I would be able now to do it in British English, for example, because that's what I've been too much into the language to, as you said, obviously I'm not native, as you said, but um, and maybe French would be, there's a lot of nasal sounds like that kind of stuff. Um, and then Spanish, it's all like very high larynx. That's kind of, but let's try not to get into, uh, insulting languages and
Language
We're
stereotypes.
flirting.
Yeah.
We're flirting with it, aren't we? We're like just kind of
Ramps
flirting
wants
with the
to
idea.
Ramps wants to make a controversial video for
Yeah.
views.
Yeah, let's stop with the Spanish. Let's not go any further after
Yeah.
Spanish.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, as someone who speaks several languages, what are some principles that you think you can share with language learning in general? What are some of the things that you, perhaps techniques or mental approaches that have been consistent with every language you've learned?
Speaking really helps, and I guess that's very obvious. But for example, with Japanese that I'm studying now, I studied on my own, like using Duolingo and doing like lessons online, and but then I joined a course like with other people, and even if they were Italian, speaking the sentence that is like written there, and just have to read it and respond. Really turn something on. So that's one thing. Also, I what helped me with English at the beginning, well, not the big at the beginning, but like in high school, for example, is that I started watching movies in the original language. Because in Italian we have a lot of dubbed movies. That's very common. So I started watching the English version or English speaking version with Italian subtitles, then with English subtitles, and then with no subtitles. As I said at the beginning, I had no idea what was happening, but then I guess the brain does something on its own without too much effort. And with Chinese, I would write a lot, just like to learn the characters. I would just spend 3 hours a day just writing a word 1,000 times. And maybe I did that in English as well at some point when I was reading books and there was a new word. I would just write it on a piece of paper. I still have some of those at home. I had a list of new words, and I would spend time like covering the words and looking at the translation and trying to guess the English word, and then the opposite, doing like covering the translation and reading the word, and then I would delete the ones that I knew and add new ones.
Okay, so some visual work, some auditory work,
Mm,
some repetition. Repetition is very kinesthetic way of working, you kind of have a balance of different techniques that you're
Yeah,
using
even
with
like
them.
the writing, as you said, like I guess if you do all of them, it helps. Obviously, all of the three.
Yeah, definitely. Like we mentioned earlier, we each have elements of all the different language types, but we just have one which is more dominant and easier for us to process. But in terms of learning anything, not just languages, we often need to find a balance of things that we're doing in order to retain that information. Going to be a bit different for question of the day today. We want to hear what questions you have for Valerio about the link between your voice and your trauma. Leave all your suggestions in the comments below and we will get back to you with his responses. All right, I want to talk about what you're doing now, if that's okay. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing, why you became inspired to do that, and let's speak a bit more about this very interesting coaching that you're doing.
Yeah, so I'm a vocal coach, and I studied to be a counselor as well. The way I see it, like the way I see life, I guess, is that we have different parts that come to make our one, and we need to look after all of them to make the other work, if that makes sense. So when I teach singing, for example, there's obviously the technique. You teach the technique. You do this way, but then for some people it's not that easy because there's emotional blocks. They worry that people might hear them, or there might be stress, so your muscles don't work well because your autonomic system is hindering some parts of you. And so when I finished my counseling, my master in counseling, I wrote this thesis and I created this service, I guess, that connects the two things, so that to work on the voice also from an emotional level, and to work on an emotional level through the use of voice. And so obviously it depends what people come to me for. So if they come for singing lessons and vocal coaching, I wouldn't go deep into the emotional part, but still I would consider it. And also obviously there's a body. If you want to sing, but if you sit at a desk all day, every day, there you go.
Yeah.
Your muscles are not gonna, and you probably, Liam, can say more about this, but your muscles won't work. There's gonna be tension that have repercussions all over the body, and the vocal folds are such a tiny element, and they are surrounded by very big muscles that can very easily stop them or make them do stuff that they shouldn't be doing. So all of this has to be considered, and obviously there's the social area as well that somehow can affect all of the other ones. So yeah, I try to see it this way. So obviously it depends what you come to me for, but I try to look at all of these parts and with every person in different degrees.
Very nice. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I completely agree. When you're sitting for long periods of time, especially if you haven't got ergonomically designed chairs, desks, etc., the positions we put ourselves in it has a profound effect on the body and what it's capable of. I mean, just the classic computer pose of shoulders hunched, arms like T-Rex. Um, that pose, everything is restricted instantly, and the muscles of the neck move into the shoulders, so that's going to affect your voice as well, of course.
Yeah, and also I guess we don't breathe if you don't move the muscles around your torso and your rib cage, your diaphragm is not gonna. If you hunch, your diaphragm is gonna be compressed, and so you can't use it
Hmm.
properly. So the breathing is affected, and the breathing affects the autonomic system. So you will feel anxious, and that will make you breathe with your chest, which is not the right thing to do, and that will make you feel more stressed. And so it's a chain that can go really wrong.
Mm. Yeah. Can you tell us a bit more about breathing and how you use that with singing, but also in terms of emotional
Yeah,
help?
yeah. So as I said, a lot of people come come to lessons, and I have to stop them like after 1 minute, because a lot of us breathe with our shoulders and chest, especially, as I said, like maybe not everyone does it in real life, but when it comes to singing, there's a lot of anxiety connected to it, because in our culture we associate singing with, like, there's an aesthetic bias to it. So if we if you're not Beyonce, then you have to, be silent, and we don't allow ourselves to make mistakes. So there's a lot of pressure when it comes to show how you do it. So that makes it even harder to breathe correctly,
Hmm.
which should be done with the diaphragmatic breathing. So basically, when you inhale, your belly should come out, because the diaphragm is like sort of like a curtain between the lungs and the stomach, the rest of the interior stuff. And when it is relaxed, it's like deflated like this. When we inhale, it should tense up, and it pushes down to make space for the lungs to fill up with air.
Hmm.
And then when we exhale, diaphragm pushes down, the stomach and all the other stuff pushes the skin forward, so your belly gets bigger, and the elasticity of the skin is enough to put it back to the original place, and help get the air out. So another common mistake that people do when singing, but also when speaking, is that we tense up our abdominal muscles. When we do that, our vocal folds also do this, and that, if you sing with this in your throat, your vocal folds can get injured, and yeah, and that's also connected to the jaw. That's
Mm.
again
It's the
like.
classic take a deep breath and then tense because I've got lots to say and I want to get through it as quickly as possible. And
Yeah,
you
exactly.
cry.
Especially, and if you breathe with your chest, there's no way to control the flow of air, because
Hmm.
that's what the diaphragm does. When it gets tense, then it slowly goes back. Whereas if you do it like this, then all the air gets out, and then the only way to keep speaking is to squeeze it out.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, that's wrong.
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do this at home.
Okay.
Hello. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. Let's go back to the conversation.
Is there a way that people can practice diaphragmatic breathing?
So the simple ways: you put one hand on your chest, one hand on your belly, and then
Hmm.
make sure that the belly is moving and the chest is not. Basically, it's easier if you do this lying down,
Okay.
and you can put something on your belly. Makes it easier to visualize, like a bottle, or I don't know, a phone, and then you imagine that's an elevator, and you just try to make it go up and down, and
Okay.
and that even like trying to push it as high as possible, so you can really feel the diaphragm working, so
Hmm.
you get used to that feeling, and so that when you're standing and when you're going around, you're going about your life, you can try to control it, because we don't have a lot of terminations in these muscles here. We can't feel them a lot. It's not like a hand,
Hmm.
or if you touch your head, whatever. So we really need to practice that skill.
Fantastic. Ramps, anything?
No. So far, so good because I see how this can be helpful in language learning, particularly when someone knows they're going to have to use English in a professional setting. And a lot of the times, that fear factor is what actually affects their language skills. So doing something like this, we also spoke about box breathing before, could help someone calm themselves down so they can be able to have a conversation.
I want to ask you about you were talking about the vocal folds earlier, how we discussed how stress, difficult situations, poor positioning can all have an effect on how they work. Do you have any kind of ways that you like to warm up your vocal cords? If you're giving lessons or if you're on stage, are there things that we can do to get our voice in the best possible condition if we're going to be presenting in some way?
Yeah. So the principle is very easy actually. So we use this exercise called SOVT, which means semi-occluded vocal tract,
Okay.
which means that the vocal tract is half closed. So basically, the idea is that you put a filter on the air that is coming out, so that the vocal
Okay.
folds are not under too much pressure. Because if you put a filter like around the lips, basically, you sort of have a back pressure that regulates the pressure below and above the vocal folds. And these can be stuff like saying the humming, because the air going through the nose reduces the amount of air that comes out, or stuff like a very good one is to put a straw in water and hum through the straw.
Okay.
And you could just do it in sirens, like this kind of stuff. You can also do it without
I'm
the
loving
fingers,
this.
but I can't. Yeah.
I'm loving this. It's like being a 6-year-old again because
Yeah,
I
it's
take
fun.
my kids to a restaurant and they are doing exactly that. So yeah. Okay. Yeah, so you're using a particular movement like the and then adding a like a range of tone to it through humming and warming up the vocal cords in
Yeah,
that way.
like a siren from like police car, like
Hmm.
going through your whole range and very quietly, possibly, so that again the vocal folds are not under a lot of stress.
Okay. How much time would you spend doing these kind of exercises before performing?
Like 5 to 10 minutes
Okay.
usually. Yeah, that's just like the beginning. Then in a singing lesson, for example, you would do more exercises like specific to what your goals are. But if you just need to warm up and make sure that you're ready to go, 5 to 10 minutes is enough.
Ramps, any questions about the vocal warm-ups?
Only just a comment that anyone who's watching, I think the very same vocal warm-ups can be used before an important meeting, an important negotiation, whatever the case is. Yeah, just that as a comment. But I'm making notes because I'm learning a lot myself today. So I think that's why I've been fairly silent, there's an opportunity to learn. So no, thank you.
Okay, I got a couple more questions. We often look at the quality of someone's voice, so the timbre of someone's voice. I've worked with a couple of people before who've said, I don't like the sound of my voice." Are there things that you can do to change that, or are we fixed with one quality of voice for the rest of our life, whether we like it or not?
So again, therapy to accept that that you can be, just that you're
I saw
just
that one coming. I saw that
yeah.
one coming.
No, like I say it joking, but actually, I get a lot of singers who come to me and say, my voice is shit. Can I say shit? I said it.
You could, it's
I
done.
can. Okay. So again, there's a lot of cultural pressure around the sound of a voice. Also, there's like, if you're a male, you can't have a thin and bright voice because you're supposed to sound like this all the time, and vice versa. So yeah, that's one thing. First, accept who you are, I would say. I'm guilty of this as well. It took me years, even like after, singing. People were buying my CDs, and I had listeners all over the world. But it took me like maybe 5 years after I recorded my first EP, to one day I was listening to a song and I was like, oh, actually, maybe I'm not that bad, And even now, sometimes I'm not happy 100% with it, but I have to learn. Like I came to terms with the fact that that's what I am, and I think that also, again, there's a lot of, like, I could start speaking like this. For example, I just lower my larynx and I'll, you get different perception of who I am. But this feels, there's a sort of, I don't recognize myself. And I think that's also connected, to what I think of myself and where I place myself in socially. And I think that, for example, I usually speak with with a very high larynx, so I don't have a very deep voice, right?
Mhm.
I have no scientific sources right now to give you, but I think that this comes from something unconscious in me that makes me sort of maybe less threatening to others.
Mhm.
There are techniques that you could, for example, just working with the larynx. So speaking with a high larynx or with a low larynx, so to change this kind of perception, for example. But I think a lot of it is related to what you think about yourself. And yeah.
The idiomatic expression "find your voice" comes to mind as a response to that question, right?
Yeah. Find
Obviously, the
yourself, find
expression
your.
"find your voice" is something else, but in this case, we kind of mean it literally, right? To find the voice that works for you.
I think it's more find yourself and then your voice will come.
Even
Oh,
better.
okay. I mean,
Yeah.
that's some Yoda level insight.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Nice, nice. Well,
Try not, there is no try.
please
Do or
just
do
do.
not do.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Fantastic. All right, the final thing I want to ask you about is prosody, is the rhythm of how we speak. Obviously, there's a big difference between Latin-based languages, Italian and English. I'm wondering if you could share any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's what we were saying before about intonation, right? It's the every language has their own prosody. Um, in communication, only 30% comes from the content, like what we perceive comes from the content. Something like 60%, I can't remember the exact numbers, but 60% comes from non-verbal communication, and
Right.
prosody is very much about that. So sometimes, I might be passing by people talking, and I could understand their intention even without hearing the words, or I could tell where they are from, even if, again, not hearing what they're saying.
Mhm.
So that's a very important uh, skill to practice. When I was in London and I heard Italian speakers speaking, it's or from anywhere really, speaking English, but with not with the right prosody or the right accent, I, you sort of think they're slightly stupid, um, which obviously they aren't. But that's the
Like
first
immediate
impression you get.
reaction. Yeah. It's immediate.
Yeah,
It's a reaction. Yeah.
yeah. And I was saying maybe that's not the same in Italian because we're not so used to people speaking the language. And if if an English speaker says two words in a row in Italian, I'm like, oh my God, you're really good, you know?
Mhm.
And that's what happened to me when I was speaking Chinese. I just said ni hao, and they were like, oh, you speak Chinese, you know? And then I could say anything else after that. But yeah, I think in English, especially because you're so used to different levels,
Right.
um, there might be yeah, something about that. So I think it's really important to, and that's why I studied that really good book, Get Rid of Your Accent, because it helped me. I don't sound British, but a lot of people would say that, and again, maybe not now because I lost it living in Italy for a few years now. But a lot of people would think I was native, but they couldn't place where I was from.
Right.
And I think that helped with the perception people had of me.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you're saying. I think when especially like as a native speaker, I saw a video about a Japanese guy talking about the subject of English speakers going to Japan and speaking English, but with a Japanese English accent,
Mm,
and whether that was rude or not. And he
mm,
was saying, no, actually, it helps us understand you. If
mm,
you speak English with the prosody of a Japanese person, it makes it easier for them to understand what you're asking them than
hmm.
if you speak with your normal natural tone
Yeah,
and rhythm. So I think it's very true. And I think you see the opposite a lot. You hear other nationals speaking English with the rhythm of their own language because this is the way your brain is programmed, right?
yeah,
You're programmed with a particular rhythm. So then you just adapt that rhythm to the new language that you're speaking in
hmm,
English.
I
yeah,
think it's also, and this is maybe, I think, Valerio, for you, it's also having spent so much time in England, you obviously realize very quickly that even among English speakers themselves, the accent is not just tied to where you're from, but tied to many other things as well. Liam's accent is more than just this is how he speaks. It tells you a little bit more about who is Liam and perhaps his family background and so on.
mm,
So I don't know if, I mean, you speak French. I don't know if it's the same in French, perhaps because French, like English, is a widely spoken language. It wouldn't surprise me if even in French, there's this sort of accent is also tied to several other things apart from where you're from, you know? I
yeah,
wouldn't be
yeah.
surprised. Perhaps even with Spanish as well.
Even in Italy, we have like so many dialects, and so you can actually tell where the person is from in Italy just by the way they speak, and no one really speaks standard Italian. So if someone does speak that, usually it means that they're from like an
Yeah,
higher level of
exactly.
society, or they're actors, basically.
Rams, any other questions?
No, man. No, like I wish we could have this conversation for a little bit longer. It's not a question, but rather a statement. So no, no other question.
Valerio, thank you so much for coming on the show
Thank
and
you.
sharing your experience. Where can people find you if they would like to get in touch?
Well, I have like around 4 Instagram accounts right now. So,
Standard, standard.
so if you just want to talk to me as a person or a singer-songwriter, I'm Valerio Lys, Valerio Lys. If you want singing lessons for me, I'm the Mindful Vocal Coach.
Okay,
And if you're interested in my counseling part, is a holistic counselor.
fantastic. We'll leave links to all of those in the show notes below. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been a real
Thank you for
pleasure
having me.
chatting with you, and I feel like we've learned a lot today.
You've taken the words right out of my mouth, man. All I can say is just thank you for allowing us to pick your brain today. So
Thank
thanks.
you. It was fun.
Amazing. All right. See you soon. Thanks a lot for watching.
Thank you.